welcome to the Own Your Epic podcast. My name is Jay Dostal, author of the book Own Your Epic, Leadership Lessons in Owning Your Voice and Your Story. In this podcast, I highlight the stories and voices of educators across the country who are making a difference in schools and uncover what makes them exceptional leaders in their field. By sharing the voices and stories of others, we can all learn to appreciate that each of us is the author of our own epic and our experiences are relatable to others, if we are willing to share them. Let's get started on the Own Your Epic process. Welcome to the Own Your Epic podcast. This is Jay Dostal, and it's a pretty cool day here today that we get to have this guest on the Own Your Epic podcast. I've gotten to know her over the past year as a colleague of mine, even though she's leaving me, but she's going off to do some bigger and better things. But I'm really excited for you to hear her story because I think you can learn a lot from it. But I'm not going to do the introduction. I'm going to have her do the introduction. So why don't you tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself?
Yes. All right. So I'm Brittney Hodges-Bolkovac. I'm an educator in Nebraska, currently working at Omaha Westside, but will be transitioning to Lincoln Public Schools here in the fall as the Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity. And yeah, just excited to be on here to hear your line of questioning to see if what I have to say is worthy for fellow educators to listen to.
Well, come on now. I already know it's worthy. It's just we're going to go down a lot of different rabbit holes. And I do have a question after this next one about diversity, equity, inclusion, because that's the role you're stepping into. But before that, I want to know and want you to tell everybody, why education? Why did you want to become an educator in the first place?
Yeah, so education is my secondary career. This is not the first. I actually, when I graduated from college, worked at a call center for a cellular company. And I got tired of hearing grown people get upset with me because they couldn't do the math on their cell phone bill and wonder why their overage charges of going to Africa were astronomical numbers. And so I finally said, this is not meant for me. I think there's something better out there. So I went back and pursued my education degree. And so I've been in the teaching field now for about 10 years, education field. And I think for me, what drew me to that, obviously not just getting yelled at on the phone and hung up by customers, but I think when I think about the individuals who help steer my life in different directions, they were all educators, from my guidance counselor to my coach to my club leader to my world history teacher. They were all pivotal people, and they all had one thing in common. They were educators. And granted, I was around them more than I was around my family, right? I'm there from 7 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night if I was doing athletics or any activities. And so those were the people who I was spending most of my time with, who ultimately shaped and really believed in something beyond high school for me.
What were your endorsed areas?
So I am endorsed in ELA, ELL, world language, and then now my admin degree.
How did you come by those? I mean, that's kind of a unique
I think they're all linguistic, right? And so, I think with English, grammar, I tend to, people say code switch back in the day, but I adapt to my areas. And I think that, if you've even seen when I'm editing a paper, you're going to have all the red marks up on it. But I think helping someone be able to broaden their horizons and interact with people. So when I taught world language, I taught Spanish for 6th through 8th grade students, and seeing them at the beginning of the year not know anything about that language, and then at the end of the year they would have friends who were Spanish speaking, and being able to have conversation or walking down the hallway and being able to pick up on things they were hearing in the hallway, for me was like rewarding. And so I've always had a love for Spanish. I tell people I'm not fluent. I know enough to survive if I were ever go to a country that spoke Spanish, but I think just being able to bridge that connection, allow people another avenue or outlet to speak with people. ELL is my endorsement also, and so you have individuals who have no idea about the English language, and so finding commonalities, whether I pick up something and we understand that, whether I use my hands to signal something, just finding a way to communicate really is going to open doors for people. And so that's why I chose those areas.
So as you were talking about those different things, referencing back to your previous answer about code switching and that sort of thing, how much of that plays a role in what you're doing now and in teaching kids a different language? And because I think everybody has to learn the ability to code switch based on the environment they're in. How did that like, does that help you in the teaching process with both students and adults?
Yeah, so I was at a seminar a while ago, and they said don't say code switching. Like, you can tell how old school a person is if they say code switching. They truly, like, what they say now is like you're what is it? You're adapting yourself based on your environment. I think for me, being a woman of color, who is somebody who grew up, I tell people I have a white mom who raised black children, right? So my mom is a Midwestern white woman who raised children who by outwardly, for all intents and purposes, I look like I'm a black woman. That's what people see me as. They don't know my mom is a white person. And so when I went to family functions, I'm around white people. But if I'm in another demographic, I'm not seen as that white person. And so I think rather than say code switching, I've been able to adapt with my surroundings. And I think I've been very fortunate. I've always lived in areas that have been very diverse. I'm very intentional with where I shop at to make sure that it's diverse, just because I never want to be that person who's in a room and I don't have anyone who I can connect with and communicate with. So when it comes to education, relationships are very huge to me. Anyone will tell you, like, I base a lot of my stuff off of the relationships. And I think by being able to be adaptable to your surroundings, adaptable to knowing who you're working with, who you're around, what level they're on, right? I never want someone to feel like I'm talking over them. I want to feel like, them to believe I'm at their level, but I'm also encouraging them to rise and be a better version of themselves. And so I think with education, whether it's language, whether it's working with the colleagues, whether it's, with my own family, I now see where they say you're adapting, because you want to make sure that you can be your best version of yourself when you're in these situations and not limit yourself based off of, code switching or not being able to relate to a person because you don't have that linguistic match with them.
So I learned something new. I'm going to try to avoid using code switching now. I'll use adapting. So talk to me a little bit about your adaptation into the different environments that you've been in, including the one now where it's, we're diverse, but we're not that diverse. We're primarily white. Yeah. Our district has been primarily white for a long time. I'm a white male, and I feel like I don't want to throw around, because this isn't a political commentary or anything, but I think the point that I'm trying to get at is what's your best suggestion or your best advice for people of all colors to learn how to adapt to the changing environment they are in without being labeled as woke or something like that?
The infamous term woke. I think it's, we're educators, we're lifelong learners, and even if you're not an educator, you should challenge yourself to learn something. And so I think asking versus assuming is huge. A lot of times, I tell people, if you don't have someone to ask, pick up a book. We're in the technology age where you can read a blog, you can, find anything at the tip of your fingers. But I think what truly is beneficial for a person is surrounding yourself and putting yourself in situations that are going to challenge you. So for example, I'm a black presenting woman outwardly, and I remember the first time I got braids done and I came to work, and never in my professional career in education have I ever had braids in my hair. And now at 37, I was like, what? Forget that. I want to wear my hair in braids and not have to wake up early and do my hair. I'm commuting an hour, and so I got braids done. And I remember I came to school, and it was interesting. The responses, right? Some were like, we still have individuals who want to touch my hair, and so that was a nice little educational piece for them. Like, no, you cannot. You can look from a distance. But then I had young black students who loved that my hair was done and thought that it was so cool because they have not seen teachers do that. I think we have other teachers of color here this year who have worn their hair in braids and different hairstyles, and I think that kind of speaks to the change that Westside has, where again, it's not the Westside I knew it was 20 years ago. You have staff of color who feel like they can come as they are. You have staff of other identities who feel like they can come as they are. But I think for me, I adapt to the students I'm working with, because if I'm talking over the students, they're not going to understand me. If I'm working with colleagues who I know might have a different opinion than me, or just might not be experienced in something, and it's no fault to their own, maybe they grew up in a rural part of Nebraska or a rural part of somewhere, and so they've never really had a colleague of color, or engaged with someone to the extent of now every day you're working with me, I don't take that as a fault to them. I use those as experiences to explain things to them. And I think it's all about how you word things, how you come at things. I have, thick skin, another term that people hate to throw out there, but I'm somebody who I would rather be the person who has these conversations. So down the line, another person who's not prepared can't have that conversation or feels uncomfortable having that conversation. And I think that's part of the adapting. I've been able to maneuver through so many different situations and so many different positions in life that it has really allowed me to navigate when I'm talking to a group of older men, or if I'm talking to a group of younger students or younger colleagues. It just really gave me the skill set of knowing, oh, read your audience, right? This is who I'm working with. Okay, now I need to use words that they're going to be familiar with. Now I need to turn it on, and it's not changing who I am, but it's me reading the room and knowing, how do I want to get my message across? And if I'm going to be savvy about it, so they're walking out here with more information than they had coming in.
Do you think your days working in the call center helped you with the adaptability? Just based on, I can just imagine, because I remember doing inbound and outbound telemarketing when I was in high school, and I could tell just by the tone of voice of the other person on the other end of the line, and were they angry, they were upset, and you just having to do a complete mind switch, like how are you going to navigate? Do you think that helped you in learning how to be adaptable?
I think knowing, wireless companies, everybody has a cell phone, like a lot of people. And so I could tell accents real quick, right? And you can, I learned different area codes and whatnot. But a lot of people, call centers, oh my goodness, those are a whole nother thing. I was joking with someone telling them that the first call center job I had, we were so cheap, the company was so cheap, they ripped pages out of phone books. And we would call people to sell them newspapers out of a phone book, right? And so it wasn't even like a digitized thing. We literally ripped out page number 105, and we had to go through with a red mark, and that's how we solicited people. But I think a call center definitely prepares you, because you never know what's on the other end of the phone, right? When I say hello with my, auto-generated, thank you for calling X, Y, and Z, this is Brittney, I never knew if the person was going to be mad, and so I was always just waiting. But I think it's something else that working in a call center that has been beneficial to me is, rather than reacting, responding. And I think a lot of times as educators, we want to be the person who has that answer. We want to immediately respond to something, but in turn, we're actually reacting. We're coming from a place of emotion. We're not logically thinking through things because we are so passionate about it, so we want to have that immediacy with our feedback. But from a call center perspective, I would say it taught me to respond, listen, more patience. Like younger Brittney, I had no patience. Like I was the instantaneous, need immediate, feedback. But now I'm like, how can we reflect on that? And I don't think it has to be something where you go home. Like I can hear someone say something in a room, and I can tell where they're coming from. How do I need to come to that person, or how do I need to engage with that person? So I would say that would be the one benefit of a call center. Cheap health insurance was another benefit, but.
So, yeah. Well, so taking that and then going into, this new role that you're going to be working in with, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which apparently everybody affiliates with CRT. If you get into a political conversation, you and I have had this conversation as well. I think I shared this with you before that, I remember going through my first training in Fayetteville on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and of course the presenter, African American male, was presenting all of this research and all of the history of education, and as I'm sitting there, I'm feeling awful because this system was built for a person like me, a white male, and as he's going through, and I'm thinking about the lack of access to education and all of that stuff, and then finally I just raised my hand because me, I'm just going to say something. I said, it's hard as a white male, it's hard for me not to feel bad about all of this stuff that has taken place. And he looked me right in the eye and he said, you don't have to feel bad, just do better. Because this wasn't done by you, but you have an opportunity to be a change agent and move forward. And I think that's where this conversation nationally is maybe skewing off into the wrong direction. And so I wanted to ask you that as someone who's walking into a new role where, you're going to be talking about DEI on the daily, and you might encounter some people who don't want to listen. They would rather just respond or react. And how do you and you do that role right here right now in some, how do you navigate those waters, and what gives you the confidence and the skill set to be able to do it so well, because you do it very well?
I think there's a gentleman named Keith Brown. I think we spoke. I used to have posters in my office about him, but he is very, very big on, just what you said, like you're a white male sitting in an assembly or a staff development, professional development training, and you start to feel bad. And what he has always said, and which I've taken to heart, is don't feel bad, because as educators, I think about this, like, if I'm teaching history and we're talking about slavery, if I'm teaching history, we're talking about, Civil War, civil rights. What I feel like history fails to mention is there were some solid white folks who really held it down and were doing the sit-ins. And even during like Civil War times, there were abolitionists who were wanting to free slaves. And so when we're talking about this, we have the power as educators to, yes, lay out all the facts. And it's not political. It's not if you're right, if you're left. It's these are real people who really existed. But what we have to do as educators, and what we owe to our students, is do the extra research, just like we expect our students to do. So yes, you can tell me all the time about, slave trading and, civil rights movements, and you see the people who are like the poster people of these things. But what history, and this is what's so frustrating for me sometimes, is they fail to acknowledge that there were white people who were sitting alongside the black people, or these people who were being mistreated, who were fighting the good fight with them, or who were helping them escape slavery. That always seems to be nowhere in a history book. And I think about again, we have to challenge ourselves to dig deeper as lifelong learners, because we owe it to our students. I never want a student in my class or a student on the admin side to come to me and say they feel bad for something, because again, they did not do it, right? They could be living their best life, a family that's welcoming, they have all friends of all different nationalities. Don't feel bad. Like you said, do better, but also maybe research people from your lineage that perhaps were helping on the other side. Right? Because we always focus on the small number of people who are doing bad, and we fail to mention individuals who are actually doing right. And so, you have your do right rules. And I think that we have to truly look at who the good ones are and stop giving so much stock into the bad when it comes to history. For me, as somebody who's with DEI, and I think working at Westside, they have been very big on belonging. And, I told a friend, I said, when a kid is removed from even their home for, ungodly circumstances, they still are expected to go to school. So we need to be the constant for students. And so I think as educators, as me, when a student comes in here, they should not feel like there's not a space for them, because at the end of the day, we are the constant for students. And so I'm sure I'll get a lot of concerned people that are going to question if we're doing CRT, or if there's a message being put out that they don't agree with. But working at Westside, I've really put in perspective of, at the end of the day, how can you question if a student doesn't have a space where they belong? Right? Like, we're setting them up with the tools. I'm not saying that what they're being taught is 100% right, but we're supposed to be thought provokers. We're supposed to be the people that are sparking that flame in a student to want to go find their own path, because in 20 years, these are going to be the CEOs of companies, the people making decisions, a principal of a school. And I think things really come full circle, but it's how can we equip our students with the tools? At the same time, how can we ensure to our patrons, our parents, our taxpayers that, no, we're not pushing a narrative on students, we're giving them all the facts, we're allowing them to figure out which way their mind is going to go. And I think that's hard for some people, because they expect us to do one thing.
There's that notion that schools are teaching kids what to think. Well, no, we're not teaching them what to think. We're teaching them how to think, so that they can make those decisions.
There's a big difference. What and how.
There's a huge difference. And I think something else that was interesting that you had brought up is, where was this outrage? Like, schools aren't the first ones to come up with DEI initiatives. Right. Like, there are corporations around the country who have DEI CEOs in all, like Walmart, for example. They've got a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Walmart's an international company. Whether you agree or disagree with their politics, they feel like they need to have that aspect in their corporation for them to be successful. And so schools are kind of looking the exact same way. So I've got to ask you this, just because I think that it's an interesting point about where we have come as educators, and it kind of goes back to that whole issue of belonging, because you know, as you and I have talked about on multiple occasions, if you feel like you belong somewhere, you're going to want to be there.
Yeah, for sure.
If you don't feel like you belong, you're probably not going to hang around those people. And I have to commend you for your work this year, and specifically with like our community walks and going to different areas of Omaha that, you know, there are a lot of people who want to just stay in their bubble and they don't want to experience those things. And you know, I'm a product of this school. I grew up in this town. There were places that I went this year that you had set up. It's like, oh my gosh, this is really cool. I had no idea that this was out there. Where do you find the joy in that? Where's because you know, it's all about joy. And I mean, do you have that sense of belonging? Does your sense of belonging grow as you set up these community walks and these events?
You know, for me with the walks, now I have to give credit. I came and the locations were already picked out. I'm just the person that knows how to get the party started. So I'm going to get people there, right? Now, this year, you guys will have some awesome ones. Even though I'm leaving, I actually spent the summer setting up 3 more for next year. So you guys will have some phenomenal
You can tell me
ones.
what they are, or am I going to have to wait?
Oh, no, I can tell you. So you guys are going to be touring the Tri-Faith.
Nice.
Tri-Faith Initiative. You guys will be participating in it.
And for those of you who don't know, the Tri-Faith Initiative is this really cool thing in Omaha, Nebraska, where you actually have a mosque, a synagogue, and a Catholic church all on the same campus. It's phenomenal. I'm glad you're able to get that set up. So you guys are going to do that, and you're going to, well, I'll be up here for it, but you're going to participate in like their walk towards equality and all that good belonging. And then you're going to, I set up the Samuel Bach Learning Center. Samuel Bach is a Holocaust survivor who expresses himself through painting. So UNO has a whole museum dedicated to him. So they're going to have that. And then the final one that you guys are going to go to is the One World Community Health Centers in their original campus, which has so much to offer the community. And so that's just kind of, again, bringing awareness to the services for our students. But for the enjoyment, I think for me, it's when I see the lights go off for people. You know, I'm not from North Omaha. I had family that grew up in North Omaha, and so I hear a lot of commentary, stereotypes. I mean, what the news puts out. And you know, at one point, North Omaha was very vibrant. A lot of stuff was happening down there. Like it was, like you think of Kansas City Jazz, Omaha was what that was prior to, you know, the separation and whatnot. But when we did the community walk down there at the Great Plains Black History Museum, and having people come in, I think that was our most well-attended event, and having people on a side of town they've never been to, right? And anytime I jokingly tell people about North Omaha, they usually talk about 2 things: timeout chicken, because the chicken is just so amazing. It is good.
And then they might have gone down to the airport, right? They're driving through. Those are literally like the 2 things that people say about North Omaha. And I think maybe 5 or 10 people said out of the whole crowd that was their first time ever being to the museum. And then once you get in the museum, you see so much history of what Omaha used to look like for blacks in North Omaha. And it really is eye-opening because, again, you see what's on the news, you hear, you know, different, you know, people's different opinions. But until you're actually in that area, it's like, oh, well, this isn't what I thought it was, or look what this once was. And then you start to delve into why it no longer is thriving the way it is. Why are we doing revitalization projects and whatnot? But also that's a part of the community that we serve here at Westside, right? You know, for people on who are listening, like we bus in students that come down. And, you know, if you're from Nebraska, you say down north, but people who come from North Omaha, and it's a demographic that 20 years ago it didn't mirror, and we didn't serve that level of demographic. So having the teachers, the staff, families go down and see an area of town that serves a large part of our students, I think for me was like, that was my reward, because now they're knowledgeable and now they can push a narrative off on the next person by word of mouth of, oh, I did go down to Omaha, and oh, did you go get the timeout chicken? No, I actually went to the Great Plains Black History Museum, and oh, did you know the Omaha Star was right across the street? So making those connections, I think for me is where the reward is. And again, just seeing people move through and take a piece of knowledge with them that they can pass on to the next person.
That was probably my favorite community walk this year. One, I got to learn more about the Divine Nine sororities and fraternities, which was cool.
Shout out to Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
There you go. But no, it was cool because I don't know if a lot of people understand the history of Omaha because it's still fighting this image as well. Omaha, Nebraska, if you're not familiar, is a very segregated city. There are different parts of the community for different races and ethnicities. North Omaha is typically African American. South Omaha is typically Hispanic. West Omaha is typically your white, or where they say white flight. And I think it's coming to grips as a community to understand that, over time it has come to this. But it doesn't have to stay that way. I mean, we're all one community and want to make sure that we feel like we belong in these different things. And I think that's the work that you did this year, just within Westside, to open up people's eyes, was really impactful. And I'm looking forward to next year. And I hope that, when you have those opportunities in Lincoln, that I'll be able to come and see some of those, because I want to learn more about Lincoln too, because it's got its own history as well.
It'll be, I think about the cultural fair, right? And so first annual multicultural fair we had here. We had, I think, 20 different identities represented. But bringing in, and again, for those of you listening who don't know what a drill team is, it's predominantly present at HBCUs, historically black college universities, and it's almost like the dance team of it. I mean, it is their dance team, their former dance team. And I remember we had the drill team here, and I did not know the reception that it was going to be having the drill team come, because it's Westside. Like, we don't have a drill team. We're trying to get a step team started for this next year. But I remember standing back and watching the crowd. And again, it's entertaining to me, but you could look through the crowd from left to right at the bleachers, and you could see kind of like it was indifferent, right? So you had people that were like loving it. Some people were like, what is happening right now? And some people who were just enjoying the moment. But I think doing things like that, it brings awareness. When I posted it on my page, I had so many people like, what? You guys brought a drill team to Westside? Like, they couldn't believe that Westside was having a drill team in the main gym, dancing, and it's like they're doing what is traditional to HBCU. So even something like that bring awareness, because those are people that didn't attend the community walk, and we had like 700 people. So that's 700 people that, while they didn't come to a community walk, they're learning about a culture simply by attending an event. And I think the hardest part sometimes is getting people there to open their eyes. Like, I wasn't worried about if people were going to enjoy this thing. It's like, I was more concerned about, can we get people in the door? Because the event's going to sell itself once you get in the door.
Well, the food sold it.
I mean, that was a win too. That was solid.
And I think also, just to kind of tag along with that too, because we've talked a lot about, when we talk about Great Plains African American History Museum, and we talk about drill teams, this multicultural fair was more than just highlighting African American culture. I mean, we had Chinese, we had Taiwan, we had Middle East, we had a Chinese dragon dance team come. I mean, it was phenomenal, and we had LGBTQ plus, LGBTQIA plus, and I think it speaks to, because I think there is also a misperception out there that when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you're just talking about African Americans.
Oh yeah, that's a given. And I think even, and people have to understand, DEI is typically any marginalized group or someone who does not have the main voice in the room. So you could even say, here is something dedicated towards single parents. That's a diversity and equity initiative right there. If we're doing something towards single parents, those could be all types of colors, and you're still benefiting a subgroup of people. You could say this is a group of young adult something. If they're not the majority in the room, at that point, you're the minority. So you're going to, how can we make this person, this voice that is often not heard, these people who don't often feel like they have a space, and it's more than just racial. And I think that's what a lot of times why it's a hot button for people is because they assume it's race-based, but there is so much diversity in, again, ADA, right? Disability, religion, ethnicity. Are you a single person? Are you an educated person? Are you a person who is only, maybe you only graduated high school, you never pursued something. Maybe you're somebody who attends a 2-year college. So there's so much in diversity. It's how are you looking at it, right? You could sit in a room full of people and say, all the redheads, come over here. Okay, then everybody who has red hair, they come over here and there's 5 of them. Okay, well now you are a marginalized group because you are not with the majority. And so I think it's really, again, to your point, it's not solely race. I think a lot of people focus on that because that's like the low-hanging fruit. It's the easiest thing to help rule something out. And so to the cultural fair, we had all types of religions, ethnicities, we had gender identity groups. And so again, trying to be as diverse because we really want a depiction of what's represented here at Westside. And it's not just a black and white thing. It's so many different nationalities, origins, where people come from, what they identify with by choice, what they identify with by birth. I mean, I think there's so much that again, low-hanging fruit, people usually nitpick at the racial part.
Man, I told you this is going to go fast. We're at 30 minutes already. But
did you get through all your questions?
I didn't, but I think that everything that you had shared is exactly what I wanted you to share because, I've had the opportunity to get to know you. I think you're a wonderful person.
Well, thank you.
You're brilliant, and I just don't think a lot of people necessarily want to take the time to get to know people at that level or understand what their expertise are because, when I first met you, I was like, man, I'm going to click with her because we are both focused on this. We're very direct. And I think that we don't mince words or anything like that. And then as we continue to work together and as you and I have had conversations, the thing that I've learned most is like as a white male, when I'm direct and to the point and don't mince words, it's viewed one way. But as a woman of color who's direct and doesn't mince words, it looks something completely different. And just being able to have those conversations with you, and I mean, I've shared with you that like the best book that I ever read, it was the toughest read I've ever had, was White Fragility. That I've always been allowed to look at things from an individual level. I've never been lumped into a giant group. And whereas some of our marginalized communities get lumped into groups. And I think that's where all the disconnect is. But I think this has been the probably second most powerful year in terms of learning and growing that I've ever had in my years in education, and a lot of that is a credit to you because of the work that you've done.
Much. Thank you. I'm just appreciative, honestly, that you are willing to listen. Public thank you here. I think I tell people you took a chance on me, right? And I was applying for jobs and everyone said I needed to have a different level of admin experience. And so you took the chance on me, so I want to thank you. You always were a shoulder where if I needed to bounce something off you, you were very receptive to it. And I appreciate if you did not know something, you still had an open viewpoint. And so I think that as you're transitioning into year 2, I think, we've discussed this, be very mindful of that because as the leader, people are going to follow your lead. And you're sometimes going to be in rooms where people are thinking what you're thinking, but they are not going to use their voice. And so continue to encourage people and sometimes read that room and say the things that Brittney might have said because I'm no longer in that room. And that might get some people to, start speaking up. But no, I definitely think you have a presence here where students, I think, can see it. I think, leadership changes are sometimes tough. I don't think it was an easy one this year, restructuring the whole admin team, but you still came in with a sense of where you wanted to get this building, how you needed to build your staff, and I think it really is resonating. So I want to thank you for taking a chance on me.
You were too kind.
I appreciate you.
We're good teammates, and we'll continue to be good teammates and colleagues and friends in the long haul, even though you're going to a rival school district.
We're Facebook official now, Jay.
There you go.
Facebook.
So if people want to know more about you, what's the best way to connect with you, or if you're for me, it's social media. People can connect through me with social media. But if they want to learn more about DEI or get different ideas from you, how would you suggest that they get in touch with you?
You know, I am always available. I tell people I am one phone call away or a tweet away.
What's your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle. Look, I finally got a Twitter this last year. It is at Bolkovac402, and that's BOLKOVAC 402. I have 85 followers. So yes, like always there. I will be employed, like I said, at Lincoln Public Schools. So you can find me on there, but or if you're on Facebook, I mean, you guys, Brittney Hodges is my name on there. But yeah, I'd say either one of those, I'm around. They can always message you. You know how to find me.
Well, we're gonna do our best to get your followers up on Twitter a little bit. Follow at Bolkovac 402 on Twitter. Brittney, thank you so much for taking the time.
This
is awesome. And for all of you out there, thank you for joining in on this episode of the Own Your Epic podcast. For more information on Own Your Epic, head over to ownyourepic.blogspot.com, where you can pick up a copy of the book and see past episodes or listen to past episodes of the podcast. Until next time, take care, everybody. Thank you for joining me on today's podcast. To find out more about Own Your Epic, check out my website at ownyourepic.blogspot.com, where you can purchase my book or subscribe to all the latest blog and podcast updates. Until next time, own your epic and share your voice and your story. It matters and can make a difference in the lives of others.